Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Hey everyone, Sue here at 1A Auto, and today on our 03 Volvo V70 we're going to show you how to replace the wheel bearing hub assembly. If you need that part or any other part for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. First thing we're going to do is remove the tire. I have weight on the tire of the vehicle still, so I can break the lug nuts free, and this is a 19 millimeter. I'm just going to break them free, then raise the vehicle up. Now that the car's up in the air, I can remove the lug studs. This is what a European car does. There's not lug nuts because there's no studs on the hub, so it's a whole post. So when you get to your last one, you better have both hands ready to grab the tire. So I don't, this one's frozen on there, but normally the wheel will fall right off. So just keep one of the lug studs partially threaded in, and you break it free. So I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the left so I can get to the caliper slider bolts. So they have plastic covers on them to keep the dirt and road salt out. They're just plastic boots, and it's an inverted inside Allen head. That's how the European cars do it. So we remove the plastic covers, just grab them and pull them out. And that's going to be a 7 millimeter Allen head. Fits right in there. We're going to break the caliper sliders free. And this is considered a pin. It's what the caliper slides on when the hydraulics are released and applied. I'm going to just loosen up my top one before I take that pin completely out. So sometimes I take a flathead screwdriver on these kind of style slider pins, and I push while I'm from the other side. So see how you can spin it, it just spins in place because it sits inside a plastic bushing like. So a flathead screwdriver, and then you can slide it, pull it, grab it and pull it right out. So you'll see from here, here's an angle of where that bolt just sits. So when I do this, look, it just spins in place now that it's unthreaded. So I just take a flathead and I just pry it out. And there we go. Now I'm going to take the caliper spring out. And that's basically a flathead screwdriver, and I just pry it one end off at a time. And set that aside. Now I can pry this caliper off. I'm just going to take a pry bar, fit it in there. And there we have our caliper. I'm going to remove the inner pad. Look at all that rust, holy moly. Wow, let's dump that in the bucket. Oh, that's a good lesson right here. So I was just going to check for caliper to see if it pushed back and, leave it in the car. I'm not leaving this caliper in this car. The actual caliper is breaking down internally. The metal is separating. It's huge flakes, and it's breaking off. Wow. So what happens under, look at that. Look at all the metal, the new metal. So this piston, an average caliper goes to 3,000 PSI with pressure from hydraulics. So this is a good lesson right here that you don't think, it's just surface rust. This piston is 3,000 PSI when you apply the brakes. That's going to leak and blow. And I don't want to be the one behind the wheel or in front of your car. So we're definitely replacing these calipers. So now we can remove the outer brake pad, and it just slides. It's got these nice little ear tabs and slides right in and out. So let's remove the caliper bracket. And I'm going to hang this caliper up with my new fancy hook from 1A Auto. As you can tell, I love that. So now we can remove the caliper bracket, and it's a 15mm socket. There's 2 of them. Let's get the top one. I want to make sure I get that socket on there because I don't want it to round the bolt off. So I'm going to tap that in with a hammer. Okay, here we go. There we go. I'll hold the bracket, and I'll take these 2 bolts out. So it's got these stopper plate arm here too. That floats, it's part of the bracket bolts. So it just goes in between the bolts and the bracket. So this is the, as soon as I get this free here. Here we go. So the bracket comes out, and that's the Volvo. So that's how it lines up. That's the turn stop on a Volvo. Now we can remove our rotor, which the hold down bolt is a 10mm socket. I'll just break that free. And obviously hold the rotor, because it's going to want to fall right off. Okay, remove that. So now we're going to remove the axle bolt. So to hold that steady, I'm going to put a couple of lug studs in and use a pry bar. Let's see which way I'm going here. All right, so I got to hold it this way. Here we go. Remove all this. And take that center bolt out. We have to push the axle inward in order to access the hub mounting bolts. You can see. You can't get a socket or anything on the heads of those with that in place. So now we'll turn our steering wheel all the way to the left, so we can get to the 2 front bolts. So I'm taking a brass punch, and I'm going to put it in the center of the axle shaft so I can give it a good push and hopefully get a little bit more room so I can get my socket in there. Break that free. Well, that's nice. See if I can get to the bottom one. There we go. We'll take the top one out. I'm going to use a ratchet wrench. See if I can get that in there. Now we're going to turn the steering wheel all the way to the right. The top one looks like a challenge. I'm going to hopefully see if a swivel socket might fit in there. A thin wall chrome socket might fit. The good thing is these aren't too tight, like surprisingly pretty easy. So a chrome thin-walled swivel 18mm with the extension fits right in there. And we can break that free with our ratchet. So let's see if it will even come out from past that axle. Yep, there we go. So if you don't have a swivel socket, you know, if you don't have some of these specialty tools, if I was to get that, I think I would take this bottom bolt off out of the strut, loosen the top one, I wouldn't remove it, and see if you can use a straight socket straight in there and an extension. That would probably be the best way to go. You might get some more throw out of the axle too. Now we're going to use my favorite tool, my 4-pound hammer. And we're just gonna hammer out this hub and it should pop right out. Nice. Of course, we're going to clean up this hub area, take a nice wire brush to it, and we'll apply some anti-seize so that the next sole doesn't have to deal with any problems. Here we have our new wheel bearing hub from 1A Auto and the factory one that we just took out of our 03 Volvo. As you can see, both hubs are the same shape. Same mounting lug nuts, even comes with the mounting pin for the rotor. On the back side we have a sealed bearing. They're the identical height. And same bolting pattern. Spindle splined. If you need this part or any other part for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. So I'm going to clean up the aluminum corrosion on this knuckle. You might see it comes out pretty good. Just a lot of road dirt and slime in there. And some axle grease because the axle boot on this was split. So it's a lot of old grease that hardened up inside. We'll take that and end up cleaning it, spraying it with some parts cleaner. Now this is an aluminum knuckle, so a lot of people will be tempted to take a air grinding wheel to this. I will say no, no, only because it's aluminum. You'll just, like hot butter, you'll take some material off. So if it means that much to you, take sandpaper with a flat edge block and scrape it that way. But right now we're just going to clean it, spray it clean. Even some of the parts cleaner can loosen up some of that corrosion on aluminum. Now we'll just take a sanding block by hand and clean that. So I take my sanding block with sandpaper and I just clean up the surface. Just gotta really work at it and be patient, but it's gonna be worth it. So we're gonna have a nice clean surface. When cleaning with the parts clean or brake clean, make sure you put your finger over that because this is a hollow bolt hole that goes into the axle where the grease is, so you don't want to put any cleaner in there. So just spray like that. Now I'm just going to take some anti-seize and just coat that aluminum so that hopefully in the future it doesn't oxidize. That can cause a warp pulsation also, if you think about it, because that hub now is not centered properly if you have a buildup of corrosion. So I'm just going to take the new hub, pick up the CV shaft, and center it. Now I got to make sure that CV shaft will slide in and out because I've got to start the bolts. I'm going to take a wire wheel brush to these bolts before I put them in. I just want to clean up the threads in the beginning. That's the part that sticks out and the weather gets to it, but it's also the part that's going to be going into a new thread on that hub first. So just a quick wire brush to make sure there's no burrs and we don't damage our new hub that we just bought. So I'm going to put the reverse procedure, I'm going to put the bolt in up here first. I have to push that axle out. There you go. And now, of course, the hub is not centered because I just put it on there. Perfect. So I just pushed the hub out a little bit, actually all the way, so that I could see the threads, make sure I'm not cross-threading anything by hand. Now I'm going to put that bottom bolt in to make sure I have the proper alignment set up for this. Once two are in, that's definitely lined up properly, so the other two won't be off center. Straighten the wheel out just a little bit, and I'll see if I can get the two front ones started by hand, so that way I avoid any cross thread. Okay, let's really turn this. I think this was the hardest one that I had taken out. Oh, there you go. The torque on these bolts is only 48 foot-pounds. That's why they were so easy coming off by hand. So I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the left, and I've got my torque wrench set to the specs, which is 48 foot-pounds. I'm going to torque them all down to 48 foot-pounds using the same extension and swivel socket. I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the right as much as I can and torque these. And the reason why I'm using the same length extension and swivel socket to install is because of the length of this and the type of metal of this socket. When you torque something, the physics, the longer the shaft on the extension, it breaks the torque down. So if I'm using the same length on all four bolts, they're getting the same amount, equal amount of torqueness. So there's also an additional 60 degrees on these torques. So once I get this all set, I have to turn my torque wrench to 60-degree turn. Gotta get in there with this one. There we go. Okay, now let's set our gauge up for 60 degrees. Start at the bottom. Turn my wheel all the way to the left. So now we're ready to put the axle center bolt in again. And just push that axle into that spindle. Got the nut bolt. Thread it in by hand. I'm going to get my torque wrench set up. So this is 35 Newton meters, or 25.8 foot-pounds, or 26 foot-pounds, whichever. So once it bottoms out, I can hold the hub. Maybe not. So we're going to put 2 lugs studs in because we need to anyways for the additional 90-degree turn. Get your pry bar ready. There's your 26 foot-pounds or 35 Newton meters. Now I'm going to get to my angle and set it up for 90 degrees. So now I'm going to install my new rotor, and I'm going to line up the bolt hole, the mounting hole. Now I can reattach my mounting bolt. And that's a 10mm socket. You just snugget it down so it holds the rotor in place. And now I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the left. Here we have the turn stop bracket that mounts on the back side of the caliper, and these are the caliper bolts. So it's very, very important to clean out the old thread lock on that and reapply new and torque this down. So I'm going to take this to the wire wheel, I'm taking the bolts over, and I'm going to clean the threads. So you take your caliper bracket and you guide it onto the rotor, and this is the knuckle, and now we're going to take the turn stop, mount that. Now I can thread it into the caliper bracket that's between the knuckle and the turn stop. There we go. 15mm ratchet wrench. I'm just going to snug them down. We've got that thread locker on the threads, so you've got to work quickly, and then we'll torque it down to the manufacturer's specs, and then we can move on to the actual caliper piston. Caliper bracket to knuckle bolts is 74 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to install my pads. The outer pad is the one with just the backing slider pin. This one with the springs goes on inside the piston. So you just literally place them on like that. So you take the inner pad, line up those 3 rabbit ears springs, and push it in like that. Now you want to make sure you pull those slider pins flush. Slide it back on. Start the slider bolts. I'm going to retorque those to the 22 foot-pounds. So we're going to put the anti-rattle clip spring bracket. There's a key to this. See, these are at an angle, and so are the guides on that. I like to put the bottom one in first, and its spring goes right there. Then I will put this top one in. Make sure that that goes all the way down in by, sometimes I just take a hammer, and I'm going to tap that into place. See how it goes underneath it? There we go. And don't forget to put your inner boot covers on. It stops the road salt and sand from getting in there to your sliders. Now it's time to pump the brakes up. Now before I install my wheel on my European car, I'm going to use the wheel stud pin set that 1A Auto supplies. It comes with 2 sets, a 12 by 1.5 or 14 by 1.25. In this case, our Volvo is a 14 by 1.25. And I'm just going to put 2 of them in there. I'm not going to use all 4. And that way, when I pull the tire up, it has something to rest on. And anyone that's ever worked on a European car knows the frustration of trying to hold the wheel up and thread in a lug stud. So the neat thing about this is how it works. I just need to line up 2 of those studs. Now I can just walk away. That's the great part, get my lug nuts, studs I mean, and I can just take my time threading them in by hand. And it's not going to fall off. So now that I've got 3 of the lug studs in there, I'm just going to tighten down, hand tighten 2 of them so that the wheel is flat against the hub. Now I can remove my helping guide pins. I can just back those out. I think it's a must for your toolbox. These things are crazy awesome, and it stops any frustrations. Now that I have them all hand tight, I can lower the vehicle down, put some slight weight on them, and torque them. So now I'm going to torque the wheel. I've got the weight of the vehicle on the tire, and the torque for this Volvo is 103 foot-pounds. And like usual, I'm going to do everything in a star pattern. Okay, let's double check. Now that the repairs are done on the driver's side, repeat the process on the passenger side.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1aauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.